Started something at the new moon in Aries. And I think that we are continuing our journey. And this new moon in Taurus, we're going to try to embody what we've started. We're going to try to find some value, meaning, and purpose in what we're trying to accomplish here. For many of us, that can be different. We're going to talk about this on an inner psychological level, as we always do. And I want to establish a framework for this. I feel like it needs more clarification, what I'm talking about. When I bring in some of the mythology, series is right here with this new moon. And I think that's important. We're going to talk about that. And I'm going to bring in another asteroid goddess, Artemis. And they are in relationship, talking to each other. They're doing their thing. But I want to talk about what I mean when I'm looking at this. What I'm talking about, and guys, this is for you. When I talk about an inner feminine psychological principle, what I'm talking about is not gender. I'm not talking about, oh, this is just for the women out there. And that goes the same for women. Both, this is not about gender. What I'm talking about is the way that our psyche operates. A feminine way of a psychology operating is curiosity, compassion, nurturing, these abilities. And that can be distorted or it can be suppressed. There's different ways. And look, Carl Jung looked at everything through this individuation lens. And he believed that do this, we had to learn to balance the inner feminine and masculine. And it didn't matter if you were what gender you. And so I really want to establish this framework so that we can be freed to talk about this because it opens up this spectrum of color that, and I just noticed that I'm wearing my Pink Floyd t-shirt today. It's perfect for this. Like it opens up this spectrum of color that allows us to see things so much more clearly. There's so much more detail involved. When I talk about a masculine sense of a psychology, I'm talking about something that's more dominant, that can be purpose driven, that can be uh, uh, un, unto itself. That can be feminine or masculine, but assertive. And look, that can be distorted too. You can either really be aggressive and trying to get what you want, which implies a lack because that's driven by a power vacuum behind it that's trying to find something that it feels is missing, or it can be suppressed as well out of fear. Both of them actually come from a state of fear. But the true thing, once again, is to find balance. And that's what I talk about with astrology as well. There are 12 archetypes on the zodiac wheel, but I really feel like there's only six because when you've balanced everything, when we've found that true center, we've expanded our self awareness, our self energy enough so that we can feel both sides of that archetype without polarity. We can feel one side with and not abandon the other side. We can be ourselves enough so that we can have both sides. And that's look, that's the utopian goal. Are we perfect? Nobody's perfect, right? We're not trying to say that you got to be perfect to accomplish this, but I really wanted to establish that framework. And when you have a masculine part of your psychology that is overpowering or dominating other parts, the curiosity, the compassion, the heartfelt stuff, that is a distortion that can go on for a long time in somebody. And this is something I'm super passionate about because that's how my own framework has worked, and that's what I'm recovering from. Is this allowing one part of your psyche to dominate so that you can blend in, so that you won't be rejected out of fear. It's something that is super tender for me, and that's why I feel so passionate to talk about it. And I understand that a lot of these asteroid goddesses involve rape and things like that. And I like to talk about this in the inner psychological level, but I also understand that it has real world implications and that this is something that really needs to be addressed, especially in the environment that we're in today. And that's not what I'm talking about today. We can maybe have a discussion about that later. But what I believe is that when we focus on our inner psychology, that flowers out, it blooms out into the world. The way that we experience our consciousness is projected out into the world. And so the best thing that we could possibly do to affect our reality is to show up healed. What if that is the right thing to do? Like that is, in my opinion, the way, the task, our job. Our job is to get a rein on our psychology, on our consciousness, so that we can show up consciously. We can bring these unconscious blended parts of ourselves into the fold and lead in a self-conscious way. Okay, so maybe there's more. I don't know, but for now I'm going to jump off this soapbox and let's talk about this new moon in Taurus. I'm going to bring up the chart here. um, so Ceres is right here, and this little asteroid is Artemis. And I think that both of these are playing a huge role in what we're doing here. I want to kind of tell a little story. Artemis is a very old asteroid goddess. She never lived within the cities. She stayed more wild. She was more of a virgin consciousness. And what I mean by that, it's not about chastity or not having sex. It's about being whole unto yourself and having your own individuality. And this can get distorted too. I think that that's super important to understand, especially when we're talking about a Taurus archetype. This is going on in Taurus. Taurus, when it's distorted, can withdraw so much into itself that it doesn't express. It doesn't. It's fearful of coming out. And Jeff Green often talked about it in the sense of you have to confront the frog to get it out of the well so that it can experience all of reality as opposed to just that little section of sky that it can see above and as well as the environment that's within the well. And so um, he also talked about Taurus as a condensing archetype, something that we're really trying to get the essence out of something. And I think that's important here because Taurus is about our self-worth and value. What are we finding value in? Where do we find our self-worth and value? And it's also about embodiment. It's a very tactile archetype. It's about feeling, right? It's sensational. Taurus enjoys good food. Taurus enjoys the the physical sensations of life. When I picture Taurus, they talk about these green fields, these green peace fields where you're just in this green open space, this wilderness that is just peaceful and serene and pristine. And and I think that that plays into the Artemis archetype. Artemis was a huntress, and she um, was quick to establish boundaries. I think this is about psychological individuation and differentiation and being able to establish your own individuality. But it's also psychic instinct. And that's what I really want to focus on here, because psychic instinct, instinctual behavior can be distorted when we're talking about an inner part system psychology, the parts that jump in and blend with us, it is a distortion of reality. Often they are playing by a story that's so old. It's something that happened, these moments that get frozen in time that we've created this meaning around. And I think that's important to talk about with Uranus in Gemini. Gemini can build up facts about a story that may or may not be true. Like the fact is true. We've talked about that on this channel before. That just because something logically makes sense doesn't mean that the understanding and the truth of it actually matches that logic. There are times when the logic can break down when it gets one more piece of truth and it finally that light of understanding comes in that changes everything. Um, and I think that's important. We just had Mercury uh, go through its superior conjunction with the sun, and that in the cycle, it starts the seed moment during the retrograde, which happened this time in Pisces. And I feel like there's a lot of unconscious reordering going on in our psychology right now that if we can sit with this and be present and have that and provide that space, then we're going to gain some insights into this. And a lot of that can go on under the surface of consciousness as well as within our conscious minds. What happens below informs what happens above. And we're still talking about the inner psychology. What happens below in our inner psychology can affect what happens in our outer world psychology. All of this is like this labyrinth of the Fibonacci sequence. That's what I actually see reality is this Fibonacci sequence. We are a consciousness. We have parts that we're here to uh, be self-led. And that doesn't mean to control them with the bony finger. That means to understand their needs and lead from a place of relational authority. And that kind of gets into this matriarchy versus patriarchy. A lot of people I've heard talk about Taurus as one of the yuga cycles where it was a matriarchal ruled society thousands of years ago. And we have gone through the antithesis of that, which is the patriarchal society, which is more of a power over or dominating uh, uh, psychology. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'd like to think it is, right? But I actually believe that we're going into a phase in the Yuga cycles where these two are going to be balanced. And I want to make the point here that matriarchy is not the opposite of patriarchy. And once again, this isn't about dominant there or gender. This isn't about gender. It is, but it's not. It's this domination, this power over ideology. But here I'm going to talk about to the women. Women can have a dominant or masculine psychology that dominates other people just as much as men can. Men just happen to be better at it because they have the physical ability to overpower and dominate. And that's been going on for so long that it's infected every bit of our psychology and the way that we think. Actually, it happens within our psychology as well. um, Once again, that's a discussion for another day, and I could jump on that and talk about it because it's something that I'm super passionate about. But I want to keep to this inner psychology. That's the framework that I want to discuss. Because if we have parts of our psyche that is dominating other parts of our psyche and we suppress it, in other words, this happens, and I think it happens from trauma, right? When you talk about a traumatic event, then we can think, oh, I'm never going to do that again, or there's a conscious way of dealing with that, and there's a post-traumatic stress psychology that can develop around that. But there's also these microaggressions that can happen within our psychology that talks about something that builds up over a long period of time. This often comes from uh, childhood neglect. There's no real dramatic, traumatic event, but there's a series of abandonment that goes on for a long period of time that the psychology just needs to suppress. And that's where we get into the complex post traumatic stress syndrome. That's a little bit harder to untangle, to unwind, to really get to the bottom. And I think that's why parts work and interfamily systems therapy is so effective, because it is so complex. There's so much involved. It can be confusing and overwhelming. And once again, I think that it's super important to make sure that you work with somebody because things are easy. It's easier with a guide. It's easier with somebody that's trained to understand, that has the compassion and the ability to hold space for people and see that the stories unfold and help them interpret how to have compassion for themselves and how to have that understanding and be able to really meet these parts of ourselves that can help us uh, become more self-led and help them understand they don't have to do these jobs that they feel forced into do out of fear and psychological neglect, right? Because when we refuse to see something, even though this is happening on a subconscious level, the parts feel neglected, and and that can play into that cycle as well. Okay, so let's get back to this psychology. We've got Ceres here, which is about nourishment. She's the goddess of agriculture, and it's about uh, holding space for children. She's in the mythology of Persephone. She loses her daughter, gets kidnapped into the underworld, and she's angry because it's a story about identity around enmeshment and over caring. It can be something where an archetype where we over care for something where we lose ourself, we lose our own identity over this. but the story actually, the mythology tells a story of transformation where through this searching and trying to get her daughter back, Persephone from the underworld, she comes into a different way of understanding how to nourish and how to care for others that doesn't lose herself. And I think that when you look at the balsamic nature of Artemis 2 series, it's a story of we're ending this hyper individuality where we kind of uh, push away and become isolated to ourselves, that virgin mentality that can get so distorted. And we're bringing them together in this new way. And because it's about balsamic here, and we've got the new moon that's all coming from this new phase of this. I think there's this beautiful story that's starting to develop. We're going to start to be able to embody some of these parts that the 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 structures that were broken down when Saturn and Neptune were dissolving and going through their balsamic phase, and now they're in this new phase, and we're as I said, we're starting something new. We're building this new. But the Taurus phase of this is about establishing value and meaning, something that's a foundation, something that's a stable foundation that can really bring forward and provide a fertile ground so that this new structure in our minds can be very strong, something that's lasting, that can provide a super self-reliance. That the virgin mentality is a beautiful archetype. To be unto oneself is the ticket out of enmeshment. And I think that having that is immensely important. This is all headed towards Uranus in Gemini. And right now, Uranus in Gemini is squaring the nodes. And I think that's important too. But it's also trining Pluto. And those Pluto is sextiling your Neptune, and Uranus is sextiling Neptune. And this is a great backdrop for all of this to occur. This Uranus is going to bring insights. We're going to get communication, Gemini. We're going to get communication from these parts of ourselves that have been dominated and jammed down in our psyche. And if we have the ability to embody presence while we're here and really understand them, then I feel like we've got this fertile ground to establish a new way forward that is just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Okay, what else have we got here? This Artemis is making a quintile to Jupiter. This last quarter quintile is a beautiful archetype. It's also squaring Juno, and Juno is about unspoken contracts and commitments. And when you put that into an inner psychological framework, we can, talk about maybe ways that we've committed to ourselves that aren't working anymore, and it's not getting us what we want anymore. And so we need to reestablish that contract and rework it in a new way. But this last quarter quintile here to Jupiter in Cancer is another story about this nurturing. It's about finding our true identity and to be able to nurture these parts of ourselves in a way that we don't lose ourselves, that we don't lose that virgin mentality that we're talking about. I think it's a beautiful thing, but where we're talking about the square to the nodes here, we're going to often see a bouncing back and forth between uh, getting too self-critical and down on ourselves and not feeling good enough to do what we're trying to establish. And that can put all this guilt and fear and doubt. And Pluto up here has just finished that journey through Capricorn. And in Aquarius, we're trying to break apart all of this crystallized conditioning that has gone on. And I think a lot of it is broken free. And I think we're looking at the remnants of this. And but there's always going to be this cycle of uh, revisiting, because it comes in cycles, and a little bit comes away, and then a little bit more comes away, and a little bit more comes away. And if we took it all off at once, it would be too much, and we would get emotionally flooded and we would shut down. And so that's why I believe it happens in cycles. And that's why I believe that the moon cycles are super important. And on the other side of this, we can distort in Pisces by getting overwhelmed. But what it's calling for is this truth, to be able to rest in the truth of us and to trust in the fact that this is going to work. This is going to work out, and we're going to find this new ability to operate within this new structure that's going to provide more space and more freedom to really be who we are on the inside. Um, I think that the other thing that I want to talk about with this is this Chiron Mars. It's right there conjunct. Mars just went new phase to Chiron. We've been talking about Chiron a lot, and I think what this is establishing is for us to have the courage to face these things, to have the courage to be present with these things and not be reactive. And that's where the embodiment comes in. If we can embody our our thoughts and stay present and have the courage to face these things, especially after this recent Pluto station retrograde, there was a lot of stuff that came up for me when that happened, that I had to sit with. And I talked a little bit about that on the full moon video. Um, but I think that this new moon is at such a late degree in Taurus that the full moon is going to be in Sagittarius. And we're going through a series of these right now where all the new moons are happening in late degrees. And so the full moon is progressed into the next sign. And so I've started to call this progressive moon cycle. And I think that what's illuminated here by committing to ourselves, which is another thing that I think is being called for, is a commitment to embody these principles. Is we can have this deeper understanding of what our system needs are, and by establishing a clear set of values that allows more space for this embodiment to occur, this is going to turn out to be such a beautiful thing. Um, I like to look at it as a 30-day cycle. We start with the new moon, 2 weeks is the full moon, and then it culminates into the dark moon cycle. It's a 6 month cycle. We're going to have a full moon in Taurus when the sun is in Scorpio, and it's a year-long cycle. We've got all of these phases, but it's about a commitment. This would be a great time to establish a meditation cycle, especially in the northern hemisphere where we're just getting into the time of year where we can spend time outside. And you don't have to have that for it to work. Um, my wife is really into the Buddhist meditation and being able to accept what is. And that's where I come up with this sacred pause, and the inner space and stuff like that. But I think that I think that we've kind of established what I think is going on here. I really like this. I'm kind of stumbling a little bit. Maybe I'm repeating myself. So I'm going to stop this share. But I just I really want to talk about that inner psychological way of seeing things adds that value. Here it is on my shirt. The spectrum of color that can really bring clarity to some of these things that we talk about. And it's just another framework to view your inner world, which really is the way to move the needle on the external world and how you show up in the world. Because once again, whatever we don't meet on the inside and form a relationship with that's conscious, when it's unconscious, it gets projected out onto others. And when it is conscious, we have that ability to show up and assert ourselves into the world. And assertion is uh, from presence and laterality rather than the over dominance or the suppression is in my goal in my world. That's the key. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to individuate through balance, through finding that ability to expand our self-led leadership enough that we can establish all of the sides of the zodiac and experience all sides without abandoning one or the other, where we end up in this distortion that doesn't work. And so I'm going to leave it at that. This is some beautiful energy. It's just starting, and I think a lot of this is unconscious, and it takes time to really feel into it. So let's all just slow down and really feel into what we are, what's forming, what's coming out, and let's find the value, meaning, and purpose in it. This comes from one of my teachers too. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being a part of this community. If you like this kind of content, hit the like, subscribe, and hype this. And we're going to be bringing out more videos. I want to talk about this Sun conjunction with Uranus. I think that's a very beautiful energy. I'll come back. We'll talk about that. And that's it for now. Thanks, guys.